What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to replace the rear control arms on this 1996 Toyota Camry. This is a station wagon, but this will work for the sedan. They're all the same, and this will work for Corollas too. It's just different part numbers. Anyway, so I have the two adjustable tow arms in the back, and on this car they're seized. It cannot get in alignment, and this is why I'm replacing them. And then I bought them all as a kit, so they came with the lower front arms. I'm not replacing the trailing arms, they're still okay, but I will show you how to take them off if you wish to replace them. And I will still link them in the description, but I won't be replacing them in this video. So, having said that, let's get started. To do this job, it'll be easiest if we start by jacking up the car and removing both left and right wheels. Once the car is safely raised and supported, you want to slide under and just spray everything down. Everything is super rusty here, and hopefully nothing is going to break. So what I'd like to start doing first is breaking free all four of these large nuts. That way when I drop the subframe, because the subframe is going to have to come down to get to these two bolts on the other side, they're right up against the gas tank. That way when I drop the subframe, the nuts are already broken free and I can just remove the bolts. I'm going to try to do this job without dropping the exhaust, but if I have to do that, I will take the hangers off the exhaust and just lower it a little bit. But I'm going to attempt to first do this without dropping the exhaust. Alright, so these side nuts broke free. The ones in the middle, I haven't been able to break them free yet. I think it's because of the angle, so I'm going to wait until the subframe drops. Next, I'm going to take off this rod that regulates the brake pressure to the rear brakes, depending on how loaded the suspension is. This might be a wagon-specific thing. So basically what I'm going to do is grab this with a 12mm socket, 12mm wrench up here, and remove this. This makes it so that when you hit the brakes really hard, and the front end dips down, the rear end goes up. This actually will remove brake pressure from the rear. That way you don't lock up your rear brakes and go into an uncontrolled slide. But we have to transfer this over. I don't know how well it's still working, but I have to get it off anyway, so we have to transfer this to the new control arm. Okay, vice grip. I'm going to use the same technique that you saw me apply earlier, which is loosen it up, spray it, work it back and forth, spray it, and so on. That's not holding. Need a better vice grip. Ow! If it hurts when you tighten, that's when you know it's tight. I'm going to make sure this nut gets nice and hot. All I have is a propane torch, so I'm going to hold it on here for a little bit, and then I'll spray it with some WD-40 again, and hopefully that'll break it free. Oh yeah. Aha, I win. So to drop this subframe, you not only have to take off the rearward bolts, but to get to this bolt right here, you have to take off the sway bar, obviously, unless you want to wrench it, but I don't want to do that. So you take off these two 12mm bolts, sway bar drops down. I've already done that on the other side, and I have sprayed all of them, as you can see, with a lot of rust penetrant. You have to do that because these will break very easily, and I've broken many of them in the past, and the only way to fix that is to either drill it and tap it, or you get a new bracket from the junkyard. So go very slow, go back and forth, make sure they come out and don't break. Just like that. that's what's supposed to happen. On the other side, I didn't break either of the two, but I guess this side was a lot weaker. Now you can move the sway bar, get your 14mm socket, and remove that nut, as well as that one. Go slow with these two, because you also definitely don't want to break these. At this point I put my floor jack underneath the middle of the subframe. That's where you jack up the car, but that's also how I'm going to support the subframe so that when I take off the last two bolts it doesn't just fall on me. It's not going to fall to the ground because there's the exhaust there, but still, you don't want it to fall. Okay, so this is the passenger's side. I'm going to take off the rearward bolt, or nut. That came off easy. And on the driver's side, take off this rearward nut. Set all of these aside so that you don't lose them. On the passenger side, this exhaust hanger is actually on the subframe, so I'm going to disconnect it. That way the subframe can drop. I know they make a tool for this, but I like to use these pliers, adjustable groove pliers. They work pretty well. There we go. Alright, at this point, I'm going to slowly lower the subframe. I might need, yep, I think it's going to need some gentle prying. There you go. And go ahead and pry it on the other side too. And let it down some more. Alright, well it seems to be staying right there, so I'm going to take the jack out. Oh, I see. It was stuck on the exhaust hanger. Okay, now we have plenty of clearance to get these nuts off and the bolts out the other side. Okay, I'm going to attempt to take these off again. Before I do, I'm going to respray them. Okay, this is actually good news, the fact that the whole bolt is spinning. Yep, I can see it spinning on the other side. That means it's not seized inside the bushings. This is spinning the whole bolt. I'm going to go ahead and hold it on the other side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get a breaker bar, and it's just the same 19mm socket on the other side, just hold it. Haha, I win again. And the bolt is free. Let's hold the other side and undo this side as well. And to separate all this, remove this spacer piece that goes behind these nuts here. On both sides, remove your nut and washer on the knuckle. Once you've done that, you can pull this arm right out. Hopefully it does come out for you and it's not seized. This one is also bent, as you can see, so that's great. That's trash. Remove this bolt out through the other side. There's another washer here. Don't forget that washer. And go ahead and pull the subframe down as needed and remove this very long bolt. Hopefully it's not seized inside the subframe for you. There's some lines here that won't let these washers come off, so it's hard. You have to push push the subframe down, pull on the bolt at the same time, and the control arm puts it in a bind, so that's tricky. All right, well, I'm just going to take this other side off for now. Oops, exhaust hanger fell. Just take off this bolt as well. What I'm trying to do right now is pull this bolt out, just like this one, while leaving the control arm flush up against the subframe. All right, that one's out. Don't forget about the washers. All right, so the arms are out of the subframe. I have temporarily reattached the subframe so it's not hanging on the exhaust. And the last thing to do is to remove the arms from the knuckle. And this might get challenging because that bolt usually gets stuck in there. So this bolt right here for me is pretty much seized in the knuckle. I'm gonna have to hammer it and probably heat here and here. Before I even do that, I know that this is not gonna come out without hitting the trailing arm, even if it was free. So what I have to do is either remove the trailing arm from down here and swing it down, or from up there and swing it down. I tried to take the trailing arm out on the other side from here, and this bolt is seized, and I don't want to have to take the wheels, the brakes, everything apart just to get to the nut on the back side. So what I'm going to do is remove that bolt right there, swing the trailing arm down, and then this bolt can come right out. Now this is the process that you would take if you were also replacing the trailing arms. Again, I'm not. But the only other thing you would do is, so if I'm removing that bolt in the video, the only other thing you would do is remove this bolt and the trailing arms out. So it's really easy. So having said that, I'm gonna get the sockets I need and let's remove that bolt up there. I'm gonna start off with a generous amount of WD-40, especially on this little tiny 10mm that's holding the parking brake cable in place. Or break it off, that's fine. It didn't break on me on the other side, but whatever. That's why they make zip ties. And now remove that bolt, which is a 17mm, and unless you're using a ratchet or a wrench, I suggest using a swivel socket. For some reason on this side I need an extension to clear the fuel tank. On the other side I did not need one. And now that that bolt is clear on that end, I'm gonna put a nut flush with the bolt, and I'm gonna use my hammer and see if it'll come off. What I'm gonna do first before I attempt to hammer on this bolt is I'm gonna take my impact, try to spin it and see if it'll even move. Sometimes you can break through bolts easier free by trying to spin them than hammering them. Next thing I'm going to do is take my hammer and hammer here. I might ruin the nut, but that's okay, I have another one. And if for some reason I don't, I can always go get one. I know I said I would not remove the wheels, but I think it'll be easier to hammer from out there. So I'm going to remove this wheel really quick. I'm going to attempt to heat it up here and right over there. Obviously I don't care about that bushing right there because I'm replacing it. If for some reason this doesn't work, I do have another bolt from the junkyard, so I can just cut this bolt, do whatever I have to do to get it out, and replace it that way, but obviously I would rather not do that. I don't know if you can tell, I have 2 impact guns right now on this. I was trying to spin it. I have double nutted this side. I figured if I spin it from both ends, maybe it'll help. I guess we'll find out. I'm gonna heat it nice and hot, spray it with some penetrant, and give it another try. Usually heat helps. Let's heat up that side as well. Again, that bushing's probably gonna catch on fire, but it's okay. I'm prepared for that. I'm heating it just on the bottom because heat rises, so automatically it'll heat up the top as well. If you heat it up from the top, you'll be heating up just the top. And if you were wondering, I have been spraying these consistently before doing this job, so it's not like I didn't prepare myself physically and mentally for this situation. I'm gonna give it another 10 seconds, spray it, and then heat it. We'll see what happens. I did try to hammer on it with a 4-pound hammer, and that was not doing anything, and I think this method is more likely to work. There's one. Now go do the same to the other side. Okay, so the control arms are out. I did the same on both sides. I got them all out. That side fought me a little more, but whatever. And obviously at this point, if you had trailing arms, you would just unbolt it here and here, pop them off, and then put them back on. And after that, let's get to reinstalling the center control arms. So here are the new control arms. Again, links in the description for these parts, as well as all the tools that you've seen me use. And when it comes time to reinstalling, you have to be careful because obviously this one with the bracket goes on this side right here, and then this one that has the adjustment in the middle goes on the passenger side. Because of this bracket, the one on the driver's side has the adjustment right here in the middle where it meets the subframe. But either way, what you want to pay attention to is the other non-adjustable arms, because they do actually go in a specific direction. Both of these center arms have a classic regular rubber bushing with a metal sleeve on the inner portion. However, on the outer part, they have a pivoting bushing. So it's basically, you can see, so as you can see, this bushing right here is able to pivot, and it's kind of like a ball and socket joint, except it's not a ball and socket. So you need to make sure that on those non-adjustable arms, you put that on the outer part. If you swap it and you put that on the inner part, you will prematurely wear out this bushing on the knuckle side. And then you're gonna have to do this job all over again very soon. So you need to make sure that the plain regular rubber bushing goes in the middle, right here on the subframe, and then the pivoting bushing goes on the knuckles. So I have my bolt. I cleaned up the threads a little bit with a wire brush, made sure that the bolt is still good. If it's not good, if it's rotted, or if it's really bent, or it's just in really poor condition, in that case you'd want to replace it. You could probably go to the dealer for it, or you could go to the junkyard and grab another one off of a vehicle there. Hopefully you can get one. I'm going to start by inserting the bolt through the non-adjustable arm. I'm gonna put anti-seize all over this, but I'm gonna wait until it's inside the knuckle so that it doesn't make a huge mess. Okay, slide that in. There's a washer on the end of the bolt. Don't forget about that. Before I slide in my other control arm, I'm gonna push this bolt out, add some anti-seize everywhere. I know it might be too much, but I'm not gonna put any on the threads. I just wanna put some where it makes contact with other pieces of metal. Now that that's all coated, grab your other control arm, insert that. Don't forget about your washer and the nut. I'm gonna get it close, but I'm gonna wait to actually tighten it until everything is set, and I'm actually gonna put the car on the ground before I fully tighten everything. That way I don't put any of these bushings in a bind. Next, you wanna do the same to the passenger side. With both sides control arms bolted in, I'm going to lower this subframe back onto the exhaust so that we can bolt in the center part. Okay, so this is what we had for bolts in the middle. I put them back together to keep them organized. So take them all apart. Make sure you have 3 washers on each bolt and then one of these big end caps. So I guess you'd say 4 washers in total, as well as this spacer plate. All right, this end cap looking thing, as well as this washer, don't come off. There's some splines here that won't let it come off. So bring your forward control arm up, put the bolt through. Don't forget to put a washer on the back side of this bushing, right where it connects to the subframe. You can use a hammer to drive the bolt in. Add a washer, and then place your adjustable control arm in. Don't forget your spacer plate. Start on your nut just so it can hold this here. Then you're going to repeat the process for this side. Okay, for this side, don't forget to put your control arms over the exhaust, obviously, but the advantage is if you forget, you can just push the knuckle out and bring it over. You don't have to mess with the exhaust at all. Get the sway bar out of your way, and then let's start in this bolt. Make sure you don't have any unneeded washers on it. Okay. Once you bring it through this forward arm, go ahead and put on the inner washer here, and then drive it in through the subframe. Once it's through, don't forget your inner washer, your control arm. Bring it through the rest of the way. Install your spacer plate / last washer. Start in both of your nuts. And at this point, I'm not going to tighten these down until I put the wheels on and then put pressure on the suspension. That way these control arms can be at the correct level for when the suspension is loaded. Otherwise, you might prematurely wear your bushings. So let's get the subframe mounted back up. Before the subframe goes up, I want to reinstall the trailing arms. That way I have more movement here. It'll be just easier to put them in. Make sure the parking brake cable is on the inner side of the trailing arm. The nut on the outer side of this trailing arm has this tab, so it can't spin. It has no room to spin, so to start it, you're gonna have to spin the bolt and hold the nut. I'm also gonna wait to snug this up until the car's on the ground. And of course, do the same thing to the other side. The next step is gonna be getting the subframe mounted onto the body. I'm gonna do that by putting a jack underneath the center. I can lift it up by hand, but then I'm gonna try and use both hands to hold it, but also use a hand to start a nut. So I'm just going to use the jack, lift it up with that. It'll be a lot easier to do the job that way. Oops. Don't lift the whole car up. Okay, right there. Now let's start on all the nuts. Remember, the one on the rear right here had this really large washer. That goes right here, and then the 14mm nut. And as for the forward mount on the subframe, make sure your brake line holder is still in place. This is the bolt that broke on me. I just cut that part out and then welded on a piece. You can get these pieces at the junkyard really easily. You just have to find a car that's not super rusty. Mine doesn't really hold the brake line, but I'm gonna put it in anyway because it actually acts as a spacer right there, so you kind of have to have it. And then slide in this piece and then secure it with a nut up front here so you can let go of it, and then start your rearward nut. Snug these two up. As you snug these up, keep in mind that your little brake line holder thing needs to still be lined up. And it just fell out. Make sure these are nice and tight. Before you mount the sway bar, this is a good opportunity to grease the bushings. I'm going to use some silicone paste. You can also use brake caliper grease if that's all you have. Just put some on there, open up the bushing, and squish it right onto the grease. Take your bracket, line that up, and start in the bracket bolts. Now tighten these up, just be careful not to snap them. Alright, and do the same thing on the other side for this. And once you're done with the front, snug up this rear bolt. And you guessed it, do the same to the other side. With the knuckle side back together on the passenger side, I'm gonna go ahead and put this nut back on. Of course, I went ahead and put way too much anti-seize on there, so that's great. Snug this up. Remove your vice grip, that's way too tight. And then reconnect this part. That probably doesn't even work anymore. You want to secure this in a very professional manner now. Now that your brake lever mover upper thingy is professionally secured, let's move on to putting on the exhaust hanger. Oops. If I had sprayed it down beforehand, it would have been easier. There we go. Next, you want to get the wheels back on so we can get the car on the ground and torque the control arms. I'm not going to show it for two reasons. One, I didn't show taking them off, and if you need to know how to take wheels on and off, just watch any of my other videos on this car and I'll show you how. Alright, wheels are back on. The subframe is tight, but the control arms are not yet, so what I'm going to do is put the car down, then crawl under here. If you have ramps or something to support the wheels with the weight of the vehicle on the suspension, then use that, but I don't have anything. If I had two spare wheels right now, I would put a wheel there and a wheel there, but I don't have them here where I'm working, so I can't do that. If you need more room than this, you can raise it up a little bit. Just make sure that there's some weight on the suspension. And after we tighten them up, I'm gonna grab the old adjustable arms. We're gonna break these free and adjust them to the right length. The right length temporarily, because obviously you'll need an alignment after this, and assuming the old ones are closer to spec than these, you wanna do that. I'm gonna start with the bolts that are on the knuckle. 19 wrench, 19 socket. I'll do the other side, and then we'll move to the middle. I'm gonna use a swivel. I know that reduces torque, but I'll check it with the ratchet afterwards, but this is gonna make it go faster at the beginning. Make sure you hold the back with a wrench or something. Don't forget about your trailing arms. Tighten those up as well. And secure the parking brake cable here. I'm going to use a couple zip ties, but if you still have the original bolt, obviously use that. Alright, and one of the last things that you have to do before you go and get yourself an alignment is to get these arms as close as possible to what they were, unless you think it's close enough and your alignment shop is not far at all. If it's down the street, just go for it. It'll be alright. But don't drive around like this. I'm actually going to try to get these as close as possible to what they were. So take a 21mm wrench and you have 2 jam nuts here. Break them both free. What is this, reverse thread? Okay, so that one broke free. Oh, okay, yeah, this is reverse thread. All right, so this inner one is reverse thread, which means to loosen it, you tighten it. I'm only gonna show this on one side because the other side is the same. So now take your original arm, and this one's bent, so I'm actually gonna add just a tiny bit of length to it because it's bent. Okay, so I can see right now that the bolt where this arm goes through is actually here, which means I need to push the wheel out a little bit. I need to extend this space right here. So I'm gonna take my 22 and I'm gonna go down. That pushes the 2 rods apart, therefore changes the toe on your rear wheel. I'm gonna check it again. Very close. Give it one more big turn. That should do it. All right, so that's spot on to how it was, but because the old one was bent, it actually made the wheel a little bit closer. So I'm gonna go another half a turn right there. And that is exactly how I want to leave it until I get an alignment. Again, I'm not gonna go drive around like this, but I want it close so that I don't ruin my already bald tires. Oh, it's reverse. Okay, lock this in, make it nice and snug, and do the same to the other arm. All right, so that sums up the video pretty much. Again, don't forget to get an alignment, take it for a test drive, make sure everything's okay. If you hear or feel anything that is unusual, double check your work, make sure everything is tight. If you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, share it if you feel like it. And again, parts, tools, and maybe torque specs will be in the description, and I will see you in the next one.